Hey everybody, Cooler Khan here, and we're going to be talking about Aquaman, directed by James Wan. Has multiple writers in credits for screenplays and stories. I'm not going to get into all of those names, but we'll talk about a little bit of that later. And starring Jason Momoa as Aquaman, Amber Heard, William Dafoe, Patrick Wilson, Nicole Kidman, Dolph Lundgren. I mean, there's a bunch of people in this movie. And overall, I gotta say, I enjoyed the movie. I thought it was a fun movie. I liked the Aquaman aspect. He's actually a cool character now, which was interesting. Like, for the longest time in my youth, he was like very subpar kind of character. People gave him a lot of crap. But Jason Momoa does a great Aquaman. He is Aquaman to me from now on. Like, he is the cool, awesome version of Aquaman. And if I'm putting it in the scale of DC movies, my top one would have to be Wonder Woman, closely followed by Man of Steel, and then I would put Aquaman a little bit below that, and then the rest of the DC movies under there. So Aquaman is still up there for the DC movies, and I liked it a lot, but I did have a lot of problems with it. So in going into the positives of this movie, the CGI stuff looked great, which I would hope it would. I mean, the amount of money they spent on that movie. But the CGI looked great. I love the underwater aspects. The way that they filmed and executed everything being underwater was great. For one, you had those rigs that made everybody look like they were kind of floating around. At some times it looked obvious, but most of the time it looked really good. And also the audio of how they were speaking underwater, I thought was done perfectly. You have a little bit slight of a audio effect that makes it sound like they're kind of underwater, but it doesn't overpower any of the dialogue. You don't have like weird bubbles everywhere, which wouldn't make any sense. You don't have any kind of really strange warping that makes it hard to understand what they're saying, which I was a little worried about. It sounded like, yes, if I was underwater and my ears were acclimated to hearing things underwater, that it may sound like that. And it didn't interfere with any of the dialogue, and I thought it sounded really well. When it came to acting, I mean, I like Jason Momoa. He did a great job as Aquaman. And Amber Heard, I thought she did a great job as well. William Dafoe is just, he's William Dafoe. He's good in whatever he does for the most part. Patrick Wilson, I liked him as the king. I thought, however, his character was kind of interchangeable. Like, you could pretty much put any actor there and it would work. But I liked him as it. I thought he looked good as the character. Some of the stuff didn't quite work, but I don't think that's his fault. I think it was more of the dialogue, the script writing part. And then Dolph Lundgren, I like Dolph Lundgren. I thought he did a good job as that king, Nereus. I thought he did a good job with that. And it's just cool seeing Dolph Lundgren in a big budget movie. So my biggest problem with the movie really was the dialogue and how they used Black Manta. At first, I thought Black Manta would be more of a bigger bad guy. Now, no spoilers. I'm not going to give any spoilers away. But they were kind of setting up in the beginning that Black Manta would be like a major character. But by the time we got to halfway through, he was not. And so I thought they could have just cut Black Manta out of this movie and made the core story about Aquaman and Patrick Wilson's King Orm character. And that would have been a much tighter story. And then save Black Manta for the second film. Or you put Black Manta in the first film. However, it makes more sense that the main villain would be King Orm because of what they're doing and him trying to get the trident and everything that you saw in the trailer. So in a way, I think we had one too many bad guys. Black Manta was underserviced because he was being overshadowed by the rest of the story and he felt disconnected. So I would have liked Black Manta to be in another movie where he could get proper representation. He could get, a good enough characterization and script to where he's a good major bad guy and not feel like a side character. However, my biggest problem with the movie was the dialogue. There were so many scenes that felt like forced exposition, and it made me roll my eyes so many times. Now, some movies, a lot of movies, they'll have what I call exposition dumps, where they'll have like one long scene where they just dump a lot of exposition into it so that try and catch people up or get them understanding what's going on in the film. For Lord of the Rings, they do it right in the beginning, right? The first shot of the movie, you have Galadriel just telling you everything that's going to happen or what's going on right now to catch you up to where the story is. So you have these exposition dumps. In Aquaman, though, they didn't really have too much of an exposition dump. They had a little bit in the beginning, but then they just kept adding lines at random scenes or right before main scenes to try and tell you what's going on, as if they had filmed a scene and decided to cut it and just add a dialogue. So for about a third of the movie, I was expecting characters to respond to other characters with things like, yeah, I understand, or duh. But they were doing things like, one scene was you had them underwater and Dolph Lundgren is with King Orm. I'm not going to give anything away with this, but they're at this ancient ruins and King Orm's like, I brought you to this place because this king statue here is standing next to this person, and this is all of the other king's things. And then he goes into why he actually talked to him. It's like, yeah, we know, we get the idea of why you're here. Like, it's pretty obvious. Why are you explaining that to us? And why are you explaining that to another king who's a part of this entire council thing? It didn't make any sense to me. I'm like, I was waiting for Dolph Lundgren to be going, yeah, I knew about this place before you were born. Or later on, before a major battle, you had Dolph Lundgren say to King Orm, remember, the reason we're here is that we're doing this. And I was kind of expecting King Orm to go, yeah, that's why I brought my entire army here. You know, we've discussed this like 10 times before we got to this point, right? So I was really confused at why they kept doing these really obvious exposition sentences that really didn't need to be said. Like, even if you cut that scene out, if you cut out that dialogue, the scene would still make perfect sense. The only thing I can think of is that maybe they were worried people of the younger age, like under 10, may not understand what's going on, and so they want to be able to set it up for them. In that aspect, I guess I can understand it. But you could also do that visually. You know, have an extra scene or two and do it visually. Or have a scene explaining it naturally, where they would actually talk about it, like during a war council or something, instead of making a really weird off-moment sentence that doesn't make any sense. Overall, I'm going to give Aquaman a B. I thought it was a fun movie. I enjoyed it. I think it's better than a lot of the other DC films. The dialogue threw me off. I didn't understand why they kept explaining things, obvious things all the time. But I love the characters. Jason Momoa is Aquaman to me. I don't want to see anyone else play Aquaman. Amber Heard was awesome, and I think she should have more. I would even like to see a movie with just her, but in future movies, I want to see more of her awesomeness, because the stuff she can do with controlling water, I think they barely touched the surface of what she could do with her character. And I would like to see a lot more of that. But what do you guys think? Comment below. Let me know your thoughts on this. Links to all of my stuff is in the description below, so check that out. And I will see you guys on the next video.